Hi, it's Rory Darkins here, and I'm really looking forward to presenting the upcoming live stream, Positive Sports Psychology, Cultivating Deep Wellbeing. In this live stream, we'll be covering what well-being is and how we measure it. We'll be looking at the links between well-being and sustainable high performance. We'll identify practical, science-based strategies to optimize well-being, and we'll have a Q&A in order to answer your questions to help you build deep well-being for yourself and others in your life. It's on Saturday the 10th of September and tickets are available now. Would love to see you there.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to episode 335 of the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Polar's new generation running watches, the Polar Pacer and the Polar Pacer Pro. I'm Brad Beer, sports and exercise physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. And as you heard at the top of the show, we are just weeks away from our next live stream event featuring positive sports psychology researcher and mental skills coach, Rory Darkins. It's an event not to be missed, taking place on the 10th of September 2022 at the time of recording. And for those who cannot make the Australian Eastern Standard Time, don't despair. All registrants will receive a post-event recording of the live stream and PDF copies of the presentation notes. Now, we felt it timely to warm you up for some mental skills training with this upcoming live stream event, so we are re-batching and releasing Rory Darkins' Expert Edition, episode 252 today. So get set with your pen and paper. There are plenty of great learnings to up your mental skills game with Rory Darkins. Rory Darkins, welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Oh, thanks, Brad. It's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations on everything you've achieved with the show today. I'm a really avid listener of yours, and I'm stoked to be here.
Well, Rory, we've been working on this for some time, particularly on my end, getting the first communication between us happening, and obviously mutual friend and former guest of the show way back on episode 32, Eloise Wellens, had for quite some time said, you must feature Rory's knowledge on the show as an expert edition. And here we are. And we're theming this, if you like, positive psychology for endurance athletes. And with all the years of wisdom you've accrued in your own professional and personal sporting journey, I think there's going to be a whole lot of great learnings that listeners take from this. So, Rory, let's start with your background, maybe with your professional work as it is now, and then we'll go back and get the back steps, because it does, I guess, paint the way to how you are doing what you do today.
Yeah, thanks. Right now I work as a mental skills coach, and I do that for myself. So I work with athletes and non-athletes as well, but particularly helping people optimize their well-being and performance. So that's the one-on-one work that I do, along with Eloise Welling. So you mentioned we do speaking in schools and corporates as well around mindset and resilience, and combining her story with the insights I've come to learn from positive psychology in various fields. So the speaking, the one-on-one coaching, and also I've been the last couple of years developing an app, and so that'll be coming out next year. So it's quite a varied professional work life, but the way I think about it is I do the same thing, just with different delivery methods.
And Rory, your background as an athlete yourself, I mean, you're a training partner with Eloise Welling, so obviously that puts you in the category of very decent runner. But before that, cricket was your first love.
Yeah, it was. I I pretty much dedicated my teenage years and early 20s to pursuing professional cricket. It was my complete passion, and anyone who knew me in that time would speak to the fact that it was most of what I spent my time doing and thinking about, and I just loved it. But I played in a few different countries. Did go and play in England and the Southern Hemisphere winter, and a few times. And that's what actually led me to Australia. I wanted to come over here and see how the Aussies did it. I heard that Australia were quite good at cricket, so I thought I want to come and learn from the best. And I just fell in love with the culture here. But cricket was such a passion, which eventually transferred to a lot of physical training to be fit for cricket, but then also a lot of mental skills training to understand how to get the best out of myself, or try to. And that's sort of what's been key in my path, I guess.
So it's that coming together of your own experiences, your own realizations as to the importance of mental skills in optimizing, as you said, not only performance, but also well-being, that's really driven you in this direction now, where, as you say, you'll consult with corporates and obviously also that keen interest in the athletic journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a special appreciation for elite athletes, and not because I necessarily was one myself, but because I remember clearly the 2012 Olympics. I had some close friends who were competing, and I was studying psychology at the time. I was pursuing my own cricket, but they both two of my friends performed really well, and then I saw them sort of return home with mental health challenges as almost a consequence of pursuing their Olympic dream and being on that stage. And as a psychology student, that really got me interested in how can we do a better job at preparing aspiring athletes to thrive in those environments, and also flourish as people, not just as athletes. And so from then onwards, really my research focus became elite athlete well-being, and how do we optimize that relationship between well-being and performance so that the pursuit of your lifetime dream doesn't actually cost you your well-being, which is what I saw was happening all too commonly.
And when you say those close to you there that went off to the 2012 Olympics, they came home with some mental health challenges, as in depression post the event, or other sort of challenges?
Yeah, particularly like a depression post the event, and a lot of it really stemmed from a lack of purpose on the after the Olympics. If you organise your entire life around a 4-year cycle where there's a pinnacle and that day comes, then the days following that, suddenly purpose wasn't there for them. And that is what sort of was the catalyst for them to experience a real lull and, and a depression of sorts. So, those are just two individual examples. But I think when I looked into it more deeply, it was all too common that we were in the pursuit of short-term performance outcomes, such as, squeezing a performance out of teams or individuals under pressure. We're actually often overlooking the full human, and there's a cost to that came later.
And Rory, I think, on non-elite athletes, or people that aren't going off to the Olympics and coming home, I think most people listening in will have experienced some degree of post-event malaise, where they may have focused on an event for a year or sometimes longer, and after it there is that sense of void where it's like, what do I do now? So can you speak to that sort of situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is, it's totally normal to experience all emotions, so experiencing a low on the back end of a really, of a high is actually quite healthy and normal. But I think the real risk comes when your identity as an individual becomes entrained with what you do. And so whether that's it's not just about elite athletes, it's anyone in life, any role that we have in life, any career that we have, for example, if that becomes your source of value and identity, then your your well-being can kind of be threatened when that is suddenly changed or when that is taken away. So, in the case of the Olympics or in the case of a big event for any individual, when that's behind you and you're thinking, it's one thing to be thinking, well, what should I do now? But it's another thing to be thinking, well, who am I now? And I think that latter question speaks to, the importance of establishing an identity that is not contingent on what you do.
Which all sounds commonsensical, doesn't it? Like, it sounds so obvious. But I'm thinking through that. I mean, this is an open question, and I appreciate the difficulty of it. But how do we do that? How do we not become entwined with what we do as our identity, whether we're a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, whatever, parent, how do we differentiate? Help us, Rory. Yeah. I think we're all stuck a little.
It is a big question, and there's no way that any one answer I can give you here is going to cover the breadth of it. But a few sort of pointers are, I think in pursuing high performance and in pursuing, meaning in life or whatever we pursue in life, I think ultimately the more we can focus on the person we're being and becoming, as opposed to what we're achieving and as opposed to, the external rewards or I think that focus on our growth as a human being, as a person, the character side of it is something that's always with us. And then we can change when what we do changes or is disrupted. It's easier to keep moving forward in a positive direction that enables us to integrate whatever's happening into a growth opportunity. And so I think, to summarize that, the more we focus on growth as a person, as opposed to external achievement or short-term outcomes, I think that can be a healthy start in that direction.
So focusing on the person or the people that we are becoming, as opposed to that optimal that outcome in and of itself. It makes me think, Rory, in observing some elite sport over the years, and particularly the extremely high performing, the gold medal winning athletes at times, the repeat gold medal athletes, winning athletes, just these absolute outlying performers. It sometimes makes me wonder if it is possible to achieve those standards in sport or in any case, any endeavour in life, by being a nice person. There almost seems to be this, almost semblance of sociopathy, where it's almost like I am getting this no matter what the cost, or who I get over in the way to get there. I think there's exceptions to the rule, but have you observed a bit of that? You must have in your time in elite sport.
Oh, absolutely. I think that definitely can be the case, and it's a really important point because often what gets us to a certain level, what drives us and fuels us to achieve, extremely high performance, it serves the purpose of making us really good at that particular endeavor. But there's a diminishing return to that, and I think there's a turning point for a lot of people where what got you here is not what's going to get you there, to the next step. And I think there's a natural kind of evolution of people in the sense where, where what enables us to get to the world stage or to win, an Olympic gold, for example, is actually when becoming aware of what that was can actually be the birthplace of the real growth that can come next, that opens up a greater future. And I think it's something that a common example is if we're driven by the need for validation. If we don't have a particularly stable sense of worth in who we are, and this can come from, upbringing and various sources, but if we constantly feel like we've got to achieve more in order to be more valuable as a person, that can get us really good at things. But then the cost to that can so often be that there's no joy available even when you do win that gold medal. But recognizing that maybe you had been driven by the need to always, prove yourself to others or to feel like you need to achieve in order to feel valued. Recognizing that has been part of your past actually gives you the power to then choose whether you want it to be part of your future. And a lot of athletes, when they recognize that, are fearful that they're going to lose their edge if they actually let go of that. And, obviously everyone is different, but I've seen many examples of people that can actually transcend that and open up a whole new realm of both performance and well-being because they're suddenly free from that burden of feeling like every time they compete, they're competing for their value and worth or their identity. And I think that's a very heavy burden to carry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think back on my own little triathlon journey over the years as a kid, and that's what drove me initially until I got to the point, which is something we want to discuss with you, Rory, around skills for dealing with anxiety, where it got to the point of, I don't even think I can get on the start line. I'm so racked with nerves and not wanting to be here, and then flicking the switch to have an opposite experience. So just recapping, you said, it's about athletes realizing that what got them there or what gets you here will not get you to the next step necessarily. And then having that self-awareness and that introspection, I guess, to truly ask, what's driving me? And I guess that can be quite confronting.
Yeah, we took it pretty deep pretty quickly there, Brad. So I think, it can be. And, that's why I say there's no answer I could give that it would actually cover that question in its entirety. But I think it's just, you're right about self-awareness. Self-awareness is the starting point of our ability to direct our own growth. And as humans, we're actually able to direct our own growth, both in terms of the people we become, but even in terms of how we can change our own brain, like the term self-directed neuroplasticity, the ability for us to direct the change of our brain by what we do with our attention. And I think we have such ability to change things about ourselves in the way that we want to become the person that we want to be. So that term self-directed neuroplasticity, can you explain that a little bit more, Rory? It sounds impressive. Apologies for bringing it in. It's essentially the brain is always changing. It's always editing the connections within the brain to be more, to better fit the environment. And that's happening whether we like it or not. But one of the great things about being human is that we actually can we can direct the changes that actually happen by what we do with our attention. And so where we direct our attention is in what we repeat. This is why things like habits are so important, because what we repeatedly do and pay attention to is actually informing how the brain is optimizing for those things. And that's why we can so easily become stuck in certain patterns of thinking and behaving. But we can also, when we recognize that we have the ability to change, we're changing all the time, but we can be in the driver's seat of that change, then it's really empowering to realize that, okay, well, what direction do I want to change how I think and, how my brain and body work. And I think for this audience too, just using if you think of it like a rep in the gym, if you want to strengthen a muscle, it's sets and reps, of a specific exercise. And, the brain's really similar in terms of patterns of thinking and connections becoming stronger with repetition.
So I guess that's cause for some degree of celebration and optimism in knowing that, we can be stuck in a rut, if you like, and have done the same thing for many repetitions, but it's plastic. It can change. We can change.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we get to steer the direction of that change.
Rory, this term, positive psychology, I think the first time I ever heard this was when I was listening to a podcast with Henry Cloud from the US, who was in his presentation, was talking about the background on this field of positive psychology. So can you just unearth what it is and how it had its genesis?
Yeah, positive psychology really means the science of optimal functioning. And so it's the study of what makes life worth living or what enables people and communities to flourish. And the way it came about is traditionally psychology was was almost exclusively focused, with some rare exceptions, was very focused on what's wrong with people and deficits and disorders. And in psychology, we got really good at diagnosing what's wrong with people, and having labels for all these kind of ailments or kind of disorders. And there was hardly any research attention given to, well, what's right with people, and what enables, what's good in humans, and what enables us to flourish. And so it was really a shifting of the goalposts of psychology to counterbalance. So it's not to ignore the fact that it's important to look at disorders and dysfunction, but it's equally important to study and to learn about, well, what makes life worth living, and what are the strengths and the unique potentials within people that we can harness. And so it's really a counterbalancing of the emphasis within the research, and so that there's a strong focus on what's right as opposed to what's wrong.
And that's been so cleverly espoused in your business name, What's Right, your podcast with Eloise, What's Right Within.
Yeah, absolutely. Our focus with that, and with so much of what we do is to really help people to connect with what's right within them. And actually, we do have naturally, it's normal for people to have a negativity bias in the way that we think. It served survival purposes in the past to place more attention to the negatives or to the threats or what just went wrong or what could go wrong. And so we're very good at noticing and analysing the negative. And what we, I think, need to train, and this is the emphasis of what we do with the podcast and also with the app, is to spend as much time and energy learning what's right about you and how to build the strengths and the potentials and all the good that is actually there that can then be a buffer against the negative. So I think it's really just learning to connect with what's right as opposed to always being pulled in that direction of what's wrong.
And I think everyone listening in, Rory, can identify with that natural proclivity to that negativity bias. It doesn't take seemingly any skill to fall into that. It's almost innate. And as you say, there's obviously, that biological protective mechanism, if you like, to fight against, to be aware of threat, etc., safety, ensure that we're safe. But then it's also having that awareness that we can, by the sounds of it, train with mental skills, etc., to shift some of that bias from being negative to the positive. And I guess that makes sense. It's in that shift that we can, as people, whatever the pursuit, harness greater levels of our potential.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's there's a whole, as I say, there's so much that can come with that, and that's the beauty of the field of positive psychology, and that it studies so many things ranging from optimism to character strengths and what purpose in life and passion and all those things that really contribute to optimal well-being and optimal functioning. But I think for most people there is such a dormant potential in terms of there's things about yourself that are really good and really valuable qualities that you can build upon in order to bring to the challenges that you face. Or, I think spending the time, to direct our mind toward nurturing those as opposed to just trying to address what we see as our weaknesses is really important.
I guess the $1 million question, Rory, and I think I have a feeling I may know the answer, but how do we begin to figure out individually? I think we'll all have some awareness of our deficits just through awareness, self-awareness, and also our loved ones and our circle of peers. But how do we begin to figure out what is right within us?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And I'm not sure if this is what you're expecting me to say, but I particularly value examining our best experiences and our best moments, and I think there's so much that we can learn from when we are at our best or times when things are going well. And the natural tendency, I had a client recently actually who was talking to me about, how do I'm really overanalyzing. I overanalyze things. It keeps me up at night. I really play back these tapes of my mind of everything that went wrong. And he's, he was saying how this tendency to overanalyze things was being really disruptive for him. And just the simple question of saying, well, how much time do you spend analyzing what went right? And, has immediately kind of had that aha of, well, actually, I don't spend any time analysing when things are going well or learning from why I performed well on the weekend. Or, I think we're so drilled to feel like if we can fix all our faults and address all our weaknesses, then that's the path to us becoming who we want to be and achieving what we want. But I think, there's such a great return on investment for analysing what's working and times that are, when we feel at our best. So that would be one thing.
Practically, Rory, that might look like stopping for a moment when things are going well, whatever that means individually, or post an event if we're talking in the sporting context, and getting a pen and paper out and journaling, or just spending a quiet moment. Any practical tips on how we can examine our best moments?
Absolutely. There's a few ways you can go, but, probably the most researched one is the 3 good things exercise. So at the end of the day, writing down 3 good things that happened that day, or, you can change the question however to suit you. Is it 3 good things or 3 things that went well, or 3 moments you're proud of, or 1 moment you're proud of, or anything like that. But it's really taking time on a regular basis. Doesn't have to be every day, but, regularly enough to ask yourself the question of what's gone well, or what good things have happened. And then the really crucial part of this question, which often gets missed in our gratitude journals and things like that we can purchase, is why. So if you're writing down something good that happened, writing down why that was good is where the real gold is. So it's not just a checklist of like, oh yeah, I've checked off some things that I feel good about today. It's really going deeper to say, well, why was that good? And it's in the answer of why that you'll probably find the information that will help you to move forward.
That's really powerful. So a practical example, Rory, might be what?
Yeah, so if you had a good race on the weekend, what went well, and you'd say raced well, and it's like, well, why was that good? And you'd come up with all the things that enabled that performance to be what you wanted. And it's in those answers that are your kind of nuggets in terms of, well, this actually works for me, or this seems to work for me. And so how can you incorporate that into your training or into your race plan for the future? So it's really examining, and you can go as deep as you like on this. It's not necessarily just stopping at that first why was that good question. It's maybe drilling down even deeper and asking what can I learn from that can move me forward, to then really extract the lessons that you kind of go out and you perform well, and it sort of feels like, oh, it just all happened, it all worked. And if we go back and analyze that, then we can actually find some nugget that is going to, maybe inform how you go about training, or maybe inform how you race, and what works for you. Because I think in this space, it's so easy to give generic advice around what is good for people, or, what works for people. But, each individual is the expert in themselves, and we're all unique. And so what works for one person will be quite different to what works for another person. And so that's why I really believe that for you as a unique individual to examine what works for you, and to focus on those, those good moments or good experiences as the lens through which to kind of find those nuggets that will help you to move forward.
And we're you're sharing around overcoming this negativity bias by examining our best moments. It makes sense just intuitively to do so, but often just due to life, I think's bias in the negative and our normal ebb and flow, we're not aware of the importance of doing this. And just to recap, Rory, you mentioned that going down a few levels to truly try and get to why that was good for us or why that worked is important. It makes me think briefly, Rory, in my role as a physiotherapist, when we ask a patient what brings them in, the obvious answer is often pain, but it's so surface level. It's normally, I find, 2 levels down. Why is that important to you? And then it's because I'm racing, and then it's, why is that race important to you? And, I can think over the years of people saying they've lost children to cancer and that they want to run this race because it's their little, token to their child they've lost. There's so much to be discovered if we just pause and ask those deeper questions often.
Absolutely, yeah. That question why is so powerful, and you can apply it to so many things. Like you've said, it's not just the moments that feel good, or it's not just great performances. It's really using that question why to drill down underneath to really get to the heart of whatever it is that you're wanting to explore.
Rory, you mentioned the negativity bias, and there may be people listening and hearing about, writing down what's good and examining best moments and gratitude journals and thinking it sounds all very woo-woo and just optimistic thinking. But there is a big difference, isn't there, from what I can gather in the bit of research I've done in preparing for today, between positive psychology and positive thinking. What is the difference?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I sort of do feel that the term positive psychology is a little unfortunate, because I think it served a purpose in getting positive psychology away from it and distinguishing, positive psychology from traditional psychology's focus on the negative. But I think really what positive psychology is the science of optimal functioning. And that includes so much more than thinking, and it includes so much more than positive thinking. So, thinking is just one aspect of our psychology, and there's a role for positive thinking and positive self-talk in some contexts, but the field of positive psychology is so much deeper and so much broader than that in terms of it. It covers what makes life meaningful and how do we achieve optimal performance, and how do we build well-being, and it's in the broader sense where well-being is not just feeling good. Well-being is living a meaningful life in a way that is authentic to you and cultivating positive relationships, and it stems into all of that in a very open way about, well, what makes life good, as opposed to just how can we think our way into what we want to becoming our reality.
Yeah. That's great. Rory, the science behind some of these things is quite fascinating. There is a great blog, I should say, published on your website, Running Free, What Usain Bolt Teaches Us About Positive Psychology. And in the blog, you touch on some of the findings from the German sports study that they did, looking at the influence of anxiety and happiness on sprint performance. Can you share a little bit about what inspired that blog and what the learnings are that we can take away from this?
Yeah, for sure. So what inspired that blog really was my research in the link between wellbeing and performance. And so for my honours research, I interviewed former Australian Test cricket captains, and through a wellbeing lens of trying to understand, well, how as an elite athlete can you maintain your wellbeing whilst achieving great things, whilst moving toward your potential in your chosen sport. And from these interviews, the number one finding was that there's a reciprocal relationship between wellbeing and performance. And what that really means is that wellbeing is a platform for performance, and performance does have a feedback loop into wellbeing. I think we can all appreciate that when we're performing well, it kind of feels good and it fuels our wellbeing as well. Some people might even say we're nicer to be around. But what's often missing in the conversation in sport that I'd noticed was the fact that wellbeing is indeed a platform for performance. And so if I were to contrast that finding with the experience of the 2 Olympians I referred to earlier who in the pursuit of performance there was a wellbeing consequence to that pursuit. And I think this finding really spoke to me of the fact that as athletes and sport organizations, we need to take wellbeing the well-being of the whole person really seriously, if for no other reason than it's going to aid performance. You know what I mean? It shouldn't just be because it is a platform for performance, but sometimes with sport organizations, you almost need to use that as a way in. And it's like these cricketers were clear that, the times when life was good off the field, their well-being was good, that's when they were free to go out and play their best. So there's a performance return on investment for valuing and improving well-being.
And you give the example of from the literature, from this German study, that athletes who were induced into a happy state prior to sprinting ran significantly faster when they were induced into an anxious or neutral emotional state.
Yeah, and obviously that's just one study, but I think what it does show us is that there's the science behind that is being taken seriously in terms of being brought into performance situations. And sprinting is one of those sports where, it's very objective, there's very small margins. And so if by knowing how to regulate your state and your state of mind in order to be optimal for you to go out and perform your best, so in developing that skill set, there can be a performance investment, return on investment. But it was quite interesting that generally the positive emotions serve them better than the more negative emotions. However, that's not always the case, and it's not the case for everyone. So I want to just put that caveat out there that it's not just about always feeling good and you'll perform better. It is about understanding your ideal performance state and then developing the skill to activate that, and to regulate your state so that it is optimal for you.
So do you mean, Rory, that some people, if we speak about sports performance, may perform better if they're angry or they're channeling a negative emotion, that they'll show someone or they'll prove something?
And for some people in some sports that can be helpful. So it's not there's no blanket rule of like the more positive you feel, the better you're going to perform. But what I'd encourage people to do is to invest in their well-being so that they have, even if in the moment anger is what serves you, for that particular sport, it's investing in your well-being and investing in your mental skills so that you can activate that in the right way at the right time and then switch it off when it no longer serves you. And I think that's the bit that we struggle with, is that, it's having the ability to regulate emotion and the ability to regulate our nervous system so that we can best be ourselves in any situation. That's a skill that we can train and develop, and that requires a lot of practice and a lot of experimentation on finding what works for you, which is linking back to the previous question about learning from when things go well. This is the sort of information you can uncover from those times, is to say, well, what state was I in before? What state was I in during, and kind of just being curious about exploring what's going to work best for us.
Yeah, that's great. And Rory, I mean, you give the example of Usain Bolt, the 2016 Rio Olympic Games, who was, smiling, his usual sort of upbeat, jovial, but focused self, and executing. And you're right, in a world where the prevailing formula is success brings happiness, such a claim may be quickly dismissed. This formula is broken. It's around the wrong way. Research from the field of positive psychology is showing us that in most contexts, happiness actually brings success. And then obviously the question is, what's happiness? And can you speak to that? I mean, it seems so nebulous and vague. We all have a sense of it when we feel happy, but how can that look in terms of our pursuits?
Yeah, absolutely. And that research is really fascinating, and that we do, I think, in society tend to have the formula around the wrong way, that, when I achieve X, then I'll feel good, or then I'll be satisfied. Or I think the more we can flip that formula around and, think of happiness as the joy you feel moving toward your potential, as the researcher Sean Aker, he sort of thinks of it that way, and a lot of that research he has led. And so I think if it's actually the joy of the process that is what's fueling us, and is kind of the, I think within pursuing our potential in anything, the process has to be the reward, because as any elite athlete knows, if you just live for that one moment where it all goes right and you get the win or the outcome or the PB, they're so few and far between just by the nature of competitive sport, right? And whereas, another well-researched kind of finding in this space is that when we find joy in the process and we actually we embrace the process and we don't over-index on the outcomes, that's what enables us to perform better over the long term as well. And so, I think it's flipping that around and saying, I'm not trying to achieve something in order to feel different about myself. If we can actually invest in our well-being to the point where we can embrace the challenges and we can experience joy along the way, then that creates a great platform upon which to express ourselves when it comes time to perform.
You're listening to Rory Darkins, positive psychology researcher and mental skills coach, on this rebatched expert edition Positive Psychology for the Endurance Athlete. Support for today's show comes lovingly from Polar. Polar recently released 2 stunning new generation running watches, the Polar Pacer and the Polar Pacer Pro. These new running watches give both the first-time runner and the serious runner the tools and the insights to track their performance and inform training. Both watches offer an incomparable running experience with powerful training and recovery features to help the runner understand their body and know when they're doing too much or not enough to reach their goals. The Polar Pacer Pro, that's the watch for those who want to run better. It's one of the most powerful and sophisticated running watches ever built. It's ultra-light with a high-performance core processor, including an extensive suite of advanced training tools that will help serious runners improve their running economy and performance. With built-in navigation and running power, it debuts at an incredible $499. Meanwhile, the Polar Pacer, well, that's the watch for those who want to fall in love with running. It's an ideal running watch for those starting their journey as runners, embodying the simplicity of running with all the essentials, plus the specialized training, sleep, and recovery tools needed to fall in love with the sport. The Polar Pacer Pro, it helps runners get started from $299. So if you feel like it's time to beat your best, jump across to Shop Polar over at polar.com. And of course, support for today's show comes from our upcoming live stream event, September the 10th, 2022, with today's guest, Rory Darkins. The live stream, titled Positive Sports Psychology, Cultivating Deep Wellbeing, will be one not to be missed. Rory has worked with Olympic athletes, beginner athletes, and the whole gamut to increase and enhance their mental skills. Topics covered will include well-being, how do we measure it and what is it, the links between well-being and performance, and practical strategies for optimizing well-being, plus some live Q&A. Tickets are $49 per registrant, available over at physicalperformanceshow.com. And rest assured, if you are outside the Australian time zone, all registrants will receive a post-event recording and PDF copies of the presentation notes. And of course, our patrons of the show, you will receive complimentary access, so keep an eye out for the access code coming your way. And if you'd like to support the show by becoming a patron of the Physical Performance Show, it's easy. Jump over to physicalperformanceshow.com, click the Patreon tab, and there you can pledge your support for the show from just $5 per month, and in return receive complimentary access to our entire back catalogue of live stream events and all upcoming live stream events, including Rory Darkins's just weeks away. For now, let's jump back with Rory Darkins exploring positive sports psychology for the endurance athlete.
Rory, this might be pushing you, but can you share your top 3 tips for how we can find joy in the process?
Yeah. So one that I use a lot is actually bringing gratitude into the moment. And that sounds a little cheesy, but practically what it sounds like is, instead of saying I've got to do this, it's flipping that to I get to do this. And so realizing that in anything, if we're talking, elite sport here, that we are choosing to do it, and we're choosing to do that training session or to go to that competition, or, and so just flipping the mindset from like, oh, I've got to do this, to I'm here, I get to do this, is a quick way to actually bring an attitude that has a bit more kind of an appreciation or gratitude to it. So that's one that can be applied to, maybe I often find that's quite helpful for people who are doing really challenging training sessions, where they start to dread it. And that's the case of, well, okay, I get to do this is one part. The other, I'm probably going to give you two things here, but one is when we view we can view a situation as either a threat or a challenge. And so if, the situation can be anything, so say a training session or say a race, we can see that if we perceive it as a threat, that's going to create anxiety, that, in our body and in our mind. So the threat is basically preparing your body. The perception of threat prepares your body to get away from what it feels like could be threatening to you, to your survival. And the same situation can also be perceived as a challenge, which is, another word for challenge would be opportunity. And so instead of looking to avoid that situation and feeling anxious about it, viewing the situation as a challenge to embrace or as an opportunity enables us to open up and move toward it. And so just changing how we see these situations and how we perceive its meaning to us can create the conditions for excitement instead of anxiety. So really the only difference between anxiety and excitement is if you perceive the situation as a threat, it's going to be more of an anxious feeling. Or if you perceive it as a challenge, it's going to be more of an excitement feeling. Physiologically, it's actually quite similar, but there's a subtle difference in your perception.
Yeah, the power of that perception. And I guess we'd all prefer to feel excited rather than, anxious. And if you just think about it, like the event still requires Rory to take that first step and then that 35,000th step to cross the finish line. It's still going to happen the same, but why on earth would we want to put a handbrake on our performance by feeling threatened by that as opposed to excited by that? It seems so obvious, but we've all had moments where we've been stuck in that, perceiving it as a threat. What is it you think drives that perception of a hard session or an event being a threat for so many athletes, Rory?
So if we perceive a situation as a threat, historically that would have been a physical threat, so there's actually our survival's at stake. Whereas in the modern day and age, the main threat that we perceive are actually emotional threats, not physical ones. And so from that perspective, what other people think of us or what other people say about us is often the greatest source of us perceiving a threat. And this shows up, if you go into a race and maybe you haven't raced for a while and you're worried about what time you're going to run and what people might think based on your time. So the threat of the race is not so much, oh, this might hurt. It's really, what will people think of me? How will people see me differently if my time is slower than it was last time? And so the threat perception there is really about other people's opinions, and we've perceived this an emotional threat, an emotional risk rather than an actual physical one.
Yeah, that's a great example, Rory. And can we be so ambitious to go for a third tip? The third tip on finding joy in the process. The first, bring gratitude in the moment. Shift from I've got to do this to I get to do this as an example of that. And then be aware of how we perceive things, whether we perceive it as a challenge or as a threat. The third tip in finding joy in the process.
To find joy in the process, I say a third thing is it's connected to the second one in terms of it's to do with perceiving threat, but view your competitors as you're competing with them rather than against them. So easily our competitors can be perceived as the threat, but when we actually are able to share in other people's success and enjoy the process of competing with others and actually being, the friendships and the healthy competition that occurs within those relationships are a great source of joy. And that's what I see, in elite sport a lot, is where, you'll have people like, I think, Eloise Wellings and Genevieve Gregson are a great example. They compete in the same event. They're often racing each other, but they genuinely enjoy each other's success, and they genuinely enjoy the experience of competing with each other. They'll train together if they're in the same place, and they're cheering each other on whilst trying to get the best out of themselves. And I think that's a really important distinction, that the competition are not all they're not threats that are all out to get you. It's actually you're competing with them. You couldn't pursue your potential without them. And so, having a worthy rival, as Simon Sinek likes to think of it, is like having these worthy rivals that actually help you to achieve your goals by helping drive you toward your potential, and embracing that rather than feeling like you wish they weren't so good.
Yeah, that's it's such a great practical tool. Compete with, not compete against people on the start line. And really, if they're going well, they're probably going to lift you to a better level, and vice versa. It just seems so obvious, but these things seem to get missed in the emotion of events and lead-ups in life. Rory, anything else you'd add? Because these tips that you've just shared on examining our best moments, finding joy in the process, I guess have largely spoken at people listening in who may experience pre-event anxiety. But is there anything else you'd share with that sort of individual?
So with regards to anxiety, I think everyone can benefit from investing in a breath practice. So I've recently begun a PhD in the link between various breathing practices and our performance and psychological well-being. And I think breathing is, we can go into it in more detail if you like, but it's such a missing link in the performance and well-being equation. And the research is really solid about the fact that it's through our breath that we can shift our state most quickly and effectively. And so if you're experiencing high anxiety, establishing a breathing practice that actually works for you to bring you back down to a lower arousal state, that can help get the body to be on the same page as where you want your mind to be in those moments.
So practically that might look like what, Rory, on a start line, taking a few deep breaths, or?
I would do it before the start line. I think it's like I say, I see a breath practice as something that we want with us anywhere we go in life, but it's finding what works for you. But the guiding principle would be, if you exhale for longer than you inhale, what that does is that slows the heart rate down. And so by lengthening your exhale to be slightly longer, if even up to double the length of your inhale, and both, if you can, through your nose in and out, there's lots of benefits to it being nasal as well. Lengthening your exhale so that you're breathing low into your abdomen, slow, and with an emphasis on the exhale being longer. That's going to that's the quickest way that I'm aware of from the science about how to slow the heart rate down and bring us back to a lower arousal state. When I say arousal, anxiety is high arousal, and calm is lower arousal.
Yeah, that's great. It makes me think. I was trying to breathe through my nose. I couldn't breathe through my nose because I had obstructions. So I've since had surgery. I can now, for the first time for 20 years, breathe through my nose, Rory. And coincidentally, your expert edition will be followed by the surgeon that did that procedure, who is wanting to bring awareness to people that if you can't breathe through your nose, it can be a real problem.
Absolutely, yeah. There's so many benefits to nose breathing, and it's something that I think as human beings we should be looking at, but particularly athletes, because I was quite shocked to note that I hadn't met an athlete who had seriously invested in breathing. And yet when we look at endurance sport, the main system that we're working with is, the cardiorespiratory system. And, it's often our breathing is what is the limiting factor in terms of can we keep going at a certain intensity. Yet we kind of just feel like by running, or, if running's our sport, that we're training it just by doing it, but there's so much more that can be done to train breathing specifically for the purpose of improving performance, but, in my opinion, more importantly, improving overall health.
Yeah. So tune in next week for Dr. Dan Robinson talking about if you do have a nose obstruction, and follow Rory's work as the research continues to... When's that PhD looking to be completed, Rory?
It'll be over the next few years, but I'm sure through social media and even with the app we're doing, we'll bring a lot of the tools to people a lot sooner than that.
Yeah, brilliant. Rory, one of the other great blogs on your website, rorydarkins.com, is the one about passion. Is it good? Is yours good for you? Where you touch on the difference between two types of passion. You say that one sort of passion will help you and one will harm you. Can you briefly speak to that concept and why that matters in terms of people out there trying to perform at their own best?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great bit of research in the positive psychology space. Is a researcher by the name of Bob Vallerand over in Canada, whom I met at one of the first conferences I spoke at. He's really pioneered this field of understanding passion scientifically, and his model has shown really that there's two types of passion. So passion can be what he calls harmonious, or it can be obsessive. And the difference, so both forms of passion are valued activities that become part of our identity, and they're important to us in our life. However, the key difference is that if your passion is obsessive, then your engagement, the activity is kind of driving you, and there's so much as you really struggle not to do it. It's almost like a compulsion to do the activity, or to it's almost like you need the activity, and whereas harmonious passion is better integrated into your life, where you're the person, you're able to choose whether you do it or not. And so a practical example would be, and I'm interested to hear what you think around this, Brad, is that when an athlete gets injured, if the passion is obsessive, then the tendency to want to rush to be back in that activity is greater. The risk of re-injury is greater, and the mental health costs of not being able to do that activity for a period of time are greater. So there's a real risk to passion being obsessive, because if for whatever reason that activity is taken away for a time, then it comes at such a cost. Whereas with harmonious passion, you love the activity just as much, it's just as important to you, but because you're still in the driver's seat over your engagement with it, you're better able to adjust when you either shouldn't do it or you can't do it. And, whether even into things like retirement, you're better able to adjust to new activities. So it can be important for us to just take stock on the activities that are sources of passion for us and think, am I driving this, or is the activity starting to drive me?
And once again, just being aware of that, Rory, can be enough to help, preference which side of the fence, if you like, we're on with that.
Absolutely, and it's really just gives language to it. It may be that when you get injured, you say, "Oh, I'm sort of feeling like it's becoming a bit obsessive." Okay, this is an opportunity to engage. One of the best bits of advice, actually, that Bob Vallerand gave for if you do identify as maybe you've got an obsessive passion, is not to get rid of that passion, because it's still a really important part of you and your life and your well-being, but is to actually balance that out with adding other things. So it's, if you are, say, injured, or you're noticing that maybe you feel like there's an obsessive passion for one activity, then invest in doing other things as well, which will almost help that existing passion to be a bit more harmonious, a bit more integrated into your life rather than consume you.
Yeah, so wise. Rory, one thing I think you said there, it gives language to it, which I think is helpful, because I think I often observe people, even myself, wrestle with the negativity of being addicted versus passionate. And I guess what you've just done is delineate that one form's healthy and one form can be, a little destructive. So
Yeah.
anything you'd say to that individual listening in that's maybe copped a bit of criticism either internally or externally that you're addicted to your training or you're addicted to that pursuit?
Oh, absolutely. And I really want to emphasize this point that being harmoniously passionate about something doesn't mean you're any less passionate than if you're obsessive, so it's not actually an amount of investment or passion or importance that you have for that activity. It's really your relationship to that activity. So for the individual listening, I would just I'd really recommend that they just don't apologize for really caring about something, and don't feel like you need to dampen your passion for anything, because passion is a great source of well-being. But it's just really ensuring that you are in the driver's seat. You're the one choosing to engage in that, as opposed to, as you used the good word in terms of addiction, because with addiction, it's like you're not really in control anymore. It's like the activity is controlling you. So just be aware of who's in control, you or the activity. And another sort of related bit of advice around that is to take the activity seriously, but not take yourself too seriously.
I've certainly observed, Rory, in my work professionally, in the physio room, people apologising for their tears when they start to open up around the injury and what it truly means to them. And I love that what you just said. Don't apologise for caring. I often say it's great. It shows how you now know how much it means. I now know how much it means to you, and you know that I know that. It's almost like but people almost feel a sense of embarrassment that they do sometimes care so much about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that comes back to fear of other people's opinion. It's what will this person think of me if they see how much I care about this. And but yeah, I think that's also where passion links with purpose. Like if you're engaged in something that really matters to you and you're kind of wholeheartedly pursuing it, that's going to be a great source of purpose, and that purpose is going to be so life-giving and sustaining and important. So it's definitely not to dampen down the passion, the level of passion, or the opportunity to experience that real meaning and purpose in things. It's just making sure that, you're the one choosing it.
Fantastic. Because as you said, Rory, passion is a great sense of well-being, a source of well-being. Rory, just one final curiosity question, and that is, does personality profiling have any role in athletic success or athletes being aware of themselves? Obviously, it's used widely in HR recruiting and the corporate world, but I seem to observe less so in the sporting world.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that I've looked at a lot, and my kind of quick thought on it is it has a place, and I particularly like to focus on character strengths, which are the qualities that would describe who you are being as a person, because character strengths speak to what we probably said right at the beginning of the podcast about focusing on who you're becoming as a person. And I think the more we connect with what's important to us and the sort of type of person that we want to be, the more that acts as a compass for us in our life. So I think getting really clear on that, if we're looking at it in that way. Other aspects of personality, I think the risk with personality profiling is that you get boxed in, and the more recent research has shown that personality isn't fixed and that it actually can change. And so there is that kind of caveat to if giving yourself a bunch of labels that you don't necessarily love that are actually quite changeable, as we talked about with neuroplasticity and the way that we change. So I wouldn't get too caught up in, almost creating a neat little box for yourself. I'd be more focused on becoming who you want to become.
Yeah, brilliant. Rory, you've shared so much and so well, but if you could boil everything you've learned throughout your own personal sporting endeavours and obviously your rich professional work to date into one piece of advice, solitary piece of advice to help listeners of the show perform at their best, what's Rory Darkins' one piece of advice going to be?
It's such a great question. So my best piece of advice to perform at your best would be to authentically express yourself in the way that best fits the situation. So it's really about being fully yourself and owning that, not trying to be anyone else, not trying to kind of emulate others per se. It's expressing the fullness of who you are. And the more we do that, the more we reveal what we're really capable of. So I think authenticity is at the heart of that.
Maybe I'm dumbing it down too much, Rory. Is that like be yourself? Is it, or is it a bit more than that?
Yeah, I would say if we were to kind of narrow it down like that, I would say give yourself permission to freely be yourself.
Give yourself permission to freely be yourself.
Yeah.
Great.
The freedom or the permission. Because I think, again, this isn't going to be a neat little answer, but it's, it's high performance is a really vulnerable thing because we're exposing ourselves. And I think the more that we can express who we really are and what we do, the more organically it's going to happen, the more naturally it's going to happen. So it's really, you could boil it right down to like, be yourself, I think.
Yeah, and that's rich too. High performance is a vulnerable pursuit because I guess it's all out there on the line. There's nowhere to hide in the, using Eloise, Genevieve Lacaze's example there, Gregson, there's nowhere to hide in the Olympic final of 10,000 metres.
Yeah.
Telecast to almost every set of eyeballs in the world.
Absolutely. High performance is a vulnerable thing. And I think that's why to pursue high performance, we actually need to get good at vulnerability. And what that means is showing up and, allowing yourself to be seen as who you are and not kind of like just trying to show parts of yourself or to, to change yourself into a different shape. It's really, that's what I mean by, showing up and being yourself and expressing the fullness of who you are, because that is what's going to enable the brakes to come off your performance and enable you to learn the most and to grow the most. And it's a vulnerable act because if you express everything that you are and people don't like it, then you're more open to getting hurt, right?
Yeah, gosh, this has been tremendous. Rory, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. Now, you can flip that on its head and turn it into a psychological challenge, a mental skill if you like. But what's Rory Darkins' physical challenge going to be?
Well, my physical challenge would actually be to do a training session purely nose breathing. And I would recommend that you just see where you can start with that. It may be your warm-up or it may be a gym session, but just see what you can comfortably maintain nasal-only breathing in, because that's going to tell you a lot about the opportunities that you have to develop in terms of your breathing skills.
Yeah, and if anyone's feeling anxious because they just can't get air in through their nose, listen next week to what can be done to improve that.
Absolutely. There's so much there, and I think it's something that we can train. So that's physical and mental, I think, because when carbon dioxide triggers the survival response in the brain, I think it becomes quite psychological and physiological very quickly.
Rory, thank you for sharing any contribution today. And obviously, there's so much more to come for yourself. You've got your PhD you're working on, the soon-to-be rebranded or relabeled What's Right app, which you mentioned maybe coming out 2021.
Yeah, so we've got the app coming out in 2021 this year, so really excited about that. There's a rebranding coming with that, so just stay tuned for that. We're going to make it available for individuals. Prior to now, we're purely available for organisations. So we're incorporating a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in terms of breathing and mental skills and well-being and purpose and performance. So you'll be able to see links to that on all my sites.
Yeah, and we must jump over, follow yourself, Rory, at Rory Darkins on social media, and then obviously the podcast, What's Right Within, across all podcast players.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. And thank you so much. Like, as I said at the beginning, I'm a massive fan of the show, and really, just want to celebrate you and your body of work that you've created and what you continue to do. I think it's a really important thing you're doing, and you're such a great voice for human potential and also health. So appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Rory. I'm trying to keep it on the harmonious passion side.
Yeah, I appreciate that can be challenging with podcasts too.
Thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for people listening. Have a great day.
So there you have it, a special episode of the Physical Performance Show as we march towards the live stream event. Now, if you enjoyed Rory's sharings from today, then go on and register for the live stream. Jump over to physicalperformanceshow.com, secure your tickets, and remember, if you're a patron of the show, you will receive your complimentary access code in the coming weeks. If you're listening to this episode post the live stream date, September the 10th, 2022, the live stream will be made available for post-event learning over on our website, physicalperformanceshow.com. Now, looking ahead, we have plenty of highs, lows and learnings coming your way, including exploration of some of the hottest endurance sporting technology on the planet, some wonderful featured performers, and some great expert editions in the queue. So until next week, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.